I'm a software engineer, and in early 2015 was working on a self-help mental health website with a psychologist. Now, in order to reach that project objective, I realized that the current approach was deeply flawed. So I created a behavior model. I threw out the DSM and anxiety along with it and replaced it with something called self-confidence issues. Now, exactly what those are is something we'll cover in the first part of this video. After that, we'll look at what might go on during childhood that would cause these issues to arise. After that, we'll look at the foresight process, which is a system that you can follow to improve your life. And finally, after that, we'll look at some practical tips so you might be able to get some immediate benefit around this whole process. Welcome to Anxiety Redefined. I'm going to start off with a lot of theory, but that's really needed to lay foundation so that you can understand the improvement process. With that, let's get to the model. The foresight model says our consciousness is effectively composed of two processes: self-esteem, which is how we look at the past, and self-confidence, how we plan for the future. In order for both to function properly, for us to accurately model reality, we need to be able to answer two questions each. We'll ignore the self-esteem questions because they're not relevant here. For self-confidence, those questions are, do I have discretion, and will I persevere? They roughly correlate with fear and worry. Now keep in mind that these are all conceptual because we're talking about a model of the brain, not a software program. Nonetheless, we will define these terms as much as we can to help your understanding. For example, fear is when the future is unknown, and worry is when the future is uncertain. So that's the first step, replacing the ambiguous anxiety label with the concept of inaccurately assessing the future. Now let's look at how those inaccuracies might come to be. Our first 3 years are key, as that's when the first version of our brain develops. It remains forever malleable, but certainly this attachment period, as it's called, is hugely important, and we'll see why that is next. After all, we aren't born with emotions, only feelings. During this period, we are given the foundation meaning to those feelings. For do I have discretion, our caregivers are supposed to let us explore and also make mistakes. And when that happens, we're supposed to have boundaries set. If our activity is controlled, however, we don't build up the what-if scenario system, nor do we learn how to balance our needs with those of others, so we over-experience fear as adults when we have to make decisions and the like. On the other hand, if we make mistakes and aren't disciplined, we will under-experience fear and learn to act entitled, dismissing the needs of others. For will I persevere, our caregivers should let us fail and teach us how to adjust accordingly until we succeed. However, if they don't let us fail, or worse, criticize our failures, we learn to worry as adults, as we don't see obstacles to overcome, but rather see reasons to stop, not knowing how to gauge what that failure accurately means. Alternately, if our failures are ignored, we learn to ignore failure and press on regardless of the circumstances and become reckless. As for correlating these self-confidence issues with anxiety, it is the over-experiencing of fear and/or worry that cause us alarm. For better or worse, we assess the future by looking at how our actions have turned out in the past. And if those actions of the past have this negative emotional coloring, or that information is absent altogether, that will impact how we feel in the present and can freeze us into inaction. So now we have this concept of inaccurately assessing the future, and we can see how those inaccuracies might develop in our childhood. Now let's look at how emotions connects it. To understand CORE, which stands for Commit, Observe, Reflect, and Edit, we need to talk about emotions first. During the course of the day, both our conscious and subconscious are constantly processing input, making sense of it by comparing it to our memories, and then drawing conclusions. In the case of the subconscious, though, it communicates that end result through our body. Feelings, or when we assign them a label and call them an emotion, are physical sensations caused by those subconscious conclusions. Keep in mind two key things. First off, the feelings are from our subconscious, so we don't know how that conclusion was made. And correlating this with the origin section, we can see how the meaning we give feelings can be skewed because of childhood patterns. Now, this isn't necessarily a problem, as we can both manage the process as well as improve the accuracy of our subconscious. Unfortunately, we don't have this knowledge and are usually, in fact, taught the opposite. To go with our gut, trust our intuition, follow our instinct, and so on. And that's what causes all of our problems. And that's how it gets connected. We have this critical subconscious influence, and whenever it relates to something with childhood development issues, it has inaccuracies. And things like these impact us on a daily basis. Now let's see what we can do about it. As for the process itself, we basically tell you that you need to learn how to get into your body so that you recognize when these physical sensations are happening and therefore affecting your thinking based upon how you feel. You need to realize that the emotion is often inaccurate and that you already have the knowledge to make choices and work through problems. However, it just feels like you don't. The process then becomes learning how to not get stuck on the emotion. Whether it's making a decision or following through on one, it's about sensing that feeling that makes you want to hesitate and pushing through it. Inaction is the enemy. Even if you make a bad choice or fail, you are still learning something. And each time, you are building up your discretion or perseverance encyclopedia, creating new stories around how do you achieve success. Discretion and perseverance have straightforward solutions tied to each of them, as they're more about learning how to break through the emotion that stops you from acting. As with all our advice, we will tell you to include friends and family, but make sure you let them know how to support you. You don't want them making the decision for you or pressuring you, but you do want them to help you decide rather than let you procrastinate. Time yourself if need be, and also embrace change. As for committing and being responsible, tell them not to let you give up or change course midway. Let them help you keep your blinders on without telling you how to work through things. That they should push you, not lead you. What's the best decision? It's the one you make. Even if it's not the best, you've added to your what-if scenarios and not lost time. And are your actions going to fail? Of course. Get your expectations in line, including the fact that failure doesn't mean stop, but rather almost always means to evolve. Acquire new information along the way and adjust accordingly. This video isn't meant to be a complete package. It's meant to give you an introduction and to let you know that there are alternatives out there. Now, my website has more information and I'm constantly adding new content. The truth is, the mental health care field really isn't great at giving support to this issue, and your community probably isn't much better. At the same time, if this is an issue that you struggle with, you have to recognize that the likelihood that you're going to make substantial success on your own is very small. So I say, reach out to other people and don't associate anything negative with it. Look at it as having the courage to ask other people for help for honestly something that we should all be comfortable doing anyway. After all, emotions are a team sport. Thank you for watching.